Welcome to Healing the Tigress, a podcast of stories and conversations on Asian American Pacific Islander maternal mental health. We are your hosts, Peggy, a licensed clinical social worker and certified breastfeeding peer counselor,
and Jasmine, a clinical pharmacist with a perinatal mental health certification. Both of us are Taiwanese American mothers and survivors of postpartum depression and anxiety.
We don't know about you, but we didn't grow up talking much about mental health in our families, and we want to change that now that we are mothers.
Together, with our clinical backgrounds and passion on the subject, we want to create a safe space for the AAPI community to discuss perinatal mental health issues.
And together, we want to break generational cycles in our own parenting journeys so that we can heal our inner tigress, a nod to the tiger moms before us. We are so happy you're tuning in here. Let's get started. Welcome back to our listeners. We had some great responses to our one and done episode a few weeks ago, and we knew we also wanted to give space to discuss the topic in a different light. If you're one and done, but not technically by choice, which you will hear about after listening to the story we're sharing today.
Today's guest, we have Val from the Wabi Sabi Mama on Instagram. And she's a mom friend that I had made on social media in the early days of the pandemic when I was just starting to talk about my postpartum depression more publicly. And Val and I connected over our stories on postpartum depression, even if they were not exactly the same. But we both valued like an honest portrayal of motherhood that we didn't always see on social media. So I personally think it was actually maybe finding someone else who was Asian American talking about it so openly that made me drawn to be friends with Val a few years back. So Val, can you please tell us a little bit more about your cultural background, and also if you can share with our listeners what the Wabi Sabi Mama actually means on your Instagram handle?
Yeah, thank you so much, Peggy and Jasmine, for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with both of you. I think it's really important, the topics that you guys discuss, and yeah, I'm just happy to be a part of it. So my username on Instagram is the Wabi Sabi Mama, and Wabi Sabi is a Japanese term, and it means finding beauty in imperfection, and also just around the topic of impermanence and that everything is fleeting. And I think when I think about motherhood, that's what I think of. I think of beauty in the imperfection. There's very rarely a time where things go perfectly or according to plan or whatever. I feel like being a mom has made me be a lot more flexible from someone who was super type A and organized and always had a plan to, okay, we're just going to wing it today. But that it's okay, that it doesn't have to be perfect, that there is beauty in the imperfections, and to really just embrace life as it comes, even if it's not exactly what you pictured. So I started creating content back in 2019, and originally it was because I had struggled a lot, especially during the early stages of motherhood. And I think that what I saw on social media didn't reflect the experience that I had. Everything was picture perfect, just this curated piece of people's lives. And I just wanted to be a voice for people that felt similarly to the way that I did, especially during that first year of motherhood, where I felt like I was always failing. I felt just like that it was hard, harder than people make it look, and just be able to connect with people on that way. And since then, I still talk about motherhood. So now I've kind of switched my content to focus on encouraging Asian American parents to celebrate their culture with their families. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm fourth generation Japanese American, and I grew up very Americanized. And one of the reasons being is because I'm fourth generation. So, the more generations that you go, the more assimilated you are to the country that you're living in. But another reason is because of World War II. And a lot of my grandparents, they were in the internment camps. And when they came out, they faced a lot of racism. And I think for them, part of getting out of the internment camps was we need to prove that we're all American. And like they didn't want to stick out. They didn't want to be a target for other people's racism. And so assimilation was the easiest way for them to go. or the safest too. And I think I'm really proud of them for what they did to make a way for our family. And I feel like it's my way of giving back for their sacrifice to be able to, now that I'm in a generation where I can express um, and like look into more of like the traditions and the cultures of my heritage. I feel like I'm living in a time where I am able to celebrate my culture, and I'm encouraged by other people to do that. And I also know that if I'm not intentional about this, then some of these traditions could be lost forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's been fun to kind of dive into that. And I feel like it's a learning experience for me too, because I think a lot of the holidays I didn't necessarily grow up celebrating, but now my son, he thinks it's normal that we celebrate some of these holidays.
Oh, I love that. I think that's really beautiful that you're honoring your past. And like you said, we have this privilege now that we can sort of take the time and give back that our parents or grandparents may have sacrificed for us to be able to be in this situation, right? So I also really love how real you are in sharing like the good and the bad in motherhood, which is why I mentioned why I felt drawn to you as a person, because you just felt so authentic, that you weren't sharing just the beautifully curated parts of motherhood, but like, and to see another Asian American do that, I thought that was really cool. So thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about your motherhood journey, like what that was like? Because I know we've talked a little bit about postpartum depression, like our journeys before, but I want our listeners to know a little bit more about your story too.
Yeah, so I would say the last trimester of my pregnancy was really difficult. I couldn't sit in a chair for like more than 20 minutes. I would have to lie down. And I think that was just kind of this like prepping me for what was to come. Um, my labor was super long, it was 45 hours,
Wow.
I think. And um, yeah, I think I'm like, oh, all these things were just preparing me for what was to come, because I'm like, oh, that was so bad. It couldn't get any worse. And then it was even harder. But yeah, my son had colic for the first 4 months of his life. And colic is when a baby cries for excessively for like many hours, and no amount of comforting or anything that you do can console the baby. They just cry. And so that's kind of what me and my husband were dealing with the first 4 months. And I have two sisters, and they both had babies before me. And I didn't know at the time because I just had such a small sample size, but their babies were so chill and so easy. Like, I remember I babysat for my sister, and she was like, oh yeah, he just goes to nap at 11 and just put him in the crib and he goes to bed. And I was like, okay. And he did that. I didn't have to rock him. I didn't have to do anything. He just went and took his nap. And then when I was a mom, I'm like bouncing on a yoga ball, have the baby in a carrier, and still nothing could console my baby. And so it was really difficult. I think I just felt really inadequate as a mom. And I think, especially when you're experiencing all of these changes and running on so little sleep, and then on top of that, having to deal with the colic issue, it just sent me into a downward spiral. And I I felt like all the time I was crying. I was just not in control of my emotions. I Some like little tiny things would just set me off. And yeah, I have dealt with depression previously before kids, but it was nothing compared to the postpartum depression and the feelings that I felt through during that time.
What do you think was the most prominent symptom or like feelings that you had?
I think it was just these feelings of inadequacy. And I think, well, I know it ties into my personality before I was a mom also, of just being very type A and being scheduled and organized, and babies aren't like that.
This is a common theme we're seeing with like all of our
I
AAPI
know,
moms.
but then you read some of the books and they're like, oh, the baby should do XYZ. And I'm like, wait, but
Mine's
my
not.
baby's doing something completely different. And like, what do I do now? But just, I think it was just day after day, just feeling like nothing that I did mattered, that it didn't matter how much like I was rocking him or whatever. He still was like, he felt unhappy. I think it was just, you know, that period of time, but it really affected how I thought about motherhood and myself. Yeah.
I think like colic is pretty common. It's like 1 in 4 newborns can have it, but also it's marked by the fact that nobody knows why the baby's crying, which is such a like frustrating kind of diagnosis, so to speak, because there's just like, what is the definition of colic? My baby's just crying inconsolably, no rhyme or reason. And for you to not have an example of that with your sisters, right? Your sisters had very chill babies, so you're going to internalize that as, well, am I doing something wrong because no one else's baby is like this? But the reality is it's can be pretty common. I think up to, we just don't hear about it, or people are like, oh yeah, babies cry. I think there's a difference between babies cry and then a colicky baby cries, and it can wear on you and it can really contribute. And I'd be curious how many moms of babies with colic do develop, perinatal mood disorder and stuff.
Yeah. It's this weird, mysterious diagnosis that I think you put on after, like, well, we've tried everything. The baby won't stop crying. The baby's fed. The baby's fine. The baby's, but they're just still crying. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the hard part, too. It's just like, there's not much you can do about it. And then there's no one to tell you. There's like, when is the light at the end of the tunnel coming? So then I think you just keep worrying, like, when is that coming? Is it coming? Right?
Yeah. And I think I tried everything. Like I was on Google all the time. Is it reflux? Does he have a milk soy protein intolerance? Is it food allergies? I cut out so much from my diet just in hopes of finding something that would fix it. But I think that in the end, it was just time. And yeah, like you said, Jasmine, I think one of the hardest things is just not knowing how long it was going to be. And I think that, I think we've talked about this before, but I think you don't like Facebook groups, but
yeah, I don't.
I really like Facebook groups.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But to each their own, right?
Yeah. So I think for me, because I can't necessarily find people in my actual community, my real life community, that are having the same struggle, then I'm like, okay, well, there must be a Facebook group for this. And there usually is.
Yep.
And so it was helpful, to look through the posts and kind of, even when you don't have an answer for what it is, and just hearing like, oh, my baby grew out of it around 4 months old, or just kind of giving you some sort of hope when the doctors, they just can kind of give well, this is, it happens to some babies.
They give the textbook answer.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yes, the textbook answer. But I'm like, I need like what's happening in real life for people.
It's funny, Val, because like I jumped to Facebook groups a lot in my newborn time too, and I had like love-hate relationship with it, because to your point, it's like Google will say one thing, but what are the other moms doing? And then like they can be really supportive, and then they can be really toxic. It's a good balance. It's like a balance. But I totally did the same thing. I was like, I joined so many in the beginning.
Yeah, definitely some can be toxic, but
I think for me, the main thing that I didn't like about the Facebook groups was that maybe just for me when I was starting out, it just felt overwhelming. Like all social media was overwhelming for me when I first started. And when I was just like really overwhelmed and depressed, like I think it just kind of further added to me, to the point where I was thinking like, how do these moms even have the energy or time to be responding to somebody? that like I don't even have that. So I think to me, maybe that's where my little sort of like, I don't like this comes from. It's more that, but I do acknowledge that some groups, I think especially if you're just kind of more mindful and taking it in with a grain of salt, some groups can be helpful. You can definitely find connection, especially in your local communities. So nothing, no shade to people who want to use Facebook groups for finding their support, because you can. So thanks for bringing that up as a sort of resource point, for people who might want to try something. And the other thing too is that you and I had postpartum depression during a time where there was no pandemic, or at least like, the pandemic hadn't started yet. Like we still had toddlers during the pandemic, but when we were new moms, like right in the newborn stage, it wasn't a pandemic time. And I think that's neither, not better or worse, because on the one hand, we didn't have to keep our distance from people. But then on the other hand, I kind of like to highlight that even though the pandemic might have worsened some people's perinatal mood disorders, postpartum depression was still happening. It was still happening prevalently even before the pandemic. So, what do you think might have been the hardest part for you having postpartum depression pre-pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a couple things. I think one is I love how now there's more of a shift towards mental health and people taking care of their mental health. I feel like when I was pregnant and having a baby, it was there, but um, it wasn't as big, I guess, as it is now, or just there's I feel like there's less stigma now than there was when I had a baby, and that I feel like now it's becoming a more holistic part of people thinking about their health, that mental health is tied to our physical health. Um, and yeah, I think that, and maybe I just didn't know because I didn't need to know, but I feel like there's a lot more resources out there now for moms, and I feel like I had to go searching for things, and it wasn't as easy. And there weren't as many people that I saw talking about it on social media, and I feel like there's more people talking about it now. Um, I think the other thing is just access to mental health. I think being able to do telehealth appointments with therapists it's just a game changer. Not, I would spend like 40 minutes commuting back and forth to go to the therapist and then come back, and like, oh, I really wish I wasn't doing that with this time. I especially when you're in that newborn phase, and I was breastfeeding and my son needed to eat. He like needed to eat pretty frequently, and it just felt like I had to rush out and then rush back so that I could nurse him. And I think that was one of the reasons why therapy didn't work out for me when I was going through postpartum depression. It was just the time. And now I think about my therapist that I have now. I just log onto the computer and then we talk and I log off and I'm like, oh, that was so great. I'm so glad I didn't have to drive to this appointment. It takes away another barrier to talking to a therapist.
Yeah. Those are all great points that like, I think I felt the same way because we, pre-pandemic, where it was like I had to go in to see somebody. And I remember even like I didn't have to commute 40 minutes like you, but even just feeling like I had to drive 15 minutes to get ready, to go out, to actually like get there and then wait in a waiting room until, you saw somebody. It definitely just felt like a lot more extra steps to have to do. And for me, like never having done therapy before, I was still very much in the mindset of like, what is this going to accomplish for me? How is this going to even be helpful for me? Am I really just wasting my time trying to get out of the house when, and the sad thing was that like while I was depressed, it's like I didn't want to be at home, but I didn't want to be out either. And it was just like I didn't want to be anywhere. It was really hard to like pinpoint that. But I do agree with you that removing that barrier of having to like be actually in the office, it helps facilitate the access. But I'm sure Peggy, like as a therapist, you probably think like seeing someone face to face actually can be helpful though.
It's funny because I had just talked to someone else about this because pre-pandemic, I actually did, we have to do like a law and ethics CEUs to renew your license. And there was one that I took on telehealth. And this is before the pandemic. And there were just so many things to be mindful of because you're doing sensitive health information. But I actually think the access trumps all of those things because there's probably so many people who are choosing not to go to therapy because of the barrier of getting out of the house and going somewhere. Imagine someone who's so depressed they can barely get off a couch, right? And
That
if
was me.
right, like if it's a matter of I don't have the energy to get into a car and drive, or I just need to hop into the next room and pop on my computer, by all means hop on the computer and be able to talk to someone, because
Yeah.
ultimately what is therapeutic is having that conversation with someone. It's doesn't necessarily need to be you in the room, and some people might say sometimes the nonverbal cues, you can see nonverbal cues on a video. It's there's some drawbacks, but I think that's something that was a barrier for me because I had my baby pre-pandemic and then he became like a 3-month old in it, right? So I wasn't able to follow up with the therapist that I had found for myself when I was pregnant, who was like a perinatal therapist, and she was like, no, I can't do over the phone, I can't do video. And so I didn't know what to do, and then everybody had to go virtual. So, but by then that she didn't have any openings and stuff. But that one's a huge one. I think access is something that also a lot of our listeners are probably, how do I even find a therapist? What does that even entail? Like the fact that you had to drive 40 minutes. I imagine it's because anyone that was any closer probably didn't have openings, or wasn't covered by your insurance. There's just so many barriers.
Yeah. What do you think ended up being the thing that helped you recover then from your postpartum depression?
I have a friend that lives pretty far away from me, actually. But in one of those like 3 a.m. night feedings that I was doing, I was like, you know what? I remember this friend posting something about fussy babies, and like scrolled back on her Facebook page to find it. And I think it was just an article or something like that. But then I reached out to her and was just letting her know what was going on, that my son had colic, and just if she had any advice for me. And that friend was my lifeline because she knew exactly what I was going through. And she was so available for me. And we actually never talked on the phone or did like a video call or anything. It was just all through texting. And I think anytime I was having a hard time, I would just text her and let her know. And then she would just encourage me. And I think having someone that has walked in your shoes, it makes a really big difference to be able to confide in that person, to feel like you're being understood. I had a really hard time connecting with other moms. I think because I felt jealous. It's because it seemed like they had it all together. It seemed like their newborn phase was this beautiful, very like harmonious time, and mine felt so like a storm. And so it was really hard for me to connect with other moms. But when when I reconnected with my friend, it was just this, we had this like deeper connection now than we had before. And it's just because we have gone through similar things. But I'm just so grateful for her and how she would still like take the time to respond to all my text messages, and I think just really make sure that I was doing okay.
And I think that again highlights why we're doing this podcast, why we're sharing stories, because hearing about it from somebody else can be so powerful, to know that you're not alone and you're not the only one struggling. Like you said, I like that you named the jealousy, because I think it can be so hard to admit that. And yet, jealousy is such a real feeling, right? And there's nothing like shameful or wrong about that. It just is, right? Because other people are showing you this side of motherhood that like you are going into it expecting, man, I should be like that too, right? But you're not, and it's disappointing when that's not your actual experience. So thank you for admitting that and being real about that, because I definitely think I felt that way too about some other moms, where it's like, why can't I be having this happy, joyful, like newborn phase time? These people are taking their babies to take newborn photos at 2 weeks old and looking all glammed up. And here I am, like, man, I am miserable. There's no way I could have accomplished that, you know?
The other common theme I noticed too, you said this earlier, that you felt like you were doing something wrong or you failed because you had no other model of what all other, there's so many different ways that early motherhood can look like and what babies can look like. And so I think that as people hear these stories, and if it's happening with them, they don't have to immediately say, I must be failing, because then they can say, this is also what this journey can look like. Maybe for some people, it is looking glamorous and taking their newborn shoots, or like going out for wine and sushi already. I couldn't even leave the house. I was so anxious. But it's like, you're not doing anything wrong if this is your early motherhood journey as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because after, I think when my son was a little bit older, maybe like 6 months old, I was talking with some moms and their kids were in high school, so much, further along in life stages. And I was sharing with them just how, and I was, some of these moms came to my baby shower, and I was talking to them just about how difficult the first few months were. And then it was like the floodgates had opened and they just started sharing, oh my gosh, when my son was a baby, he did this and this and this. And they were sharing the parts that I needed to hear before. And I don't know if I would have gotten it.
Yeah.
Because I was just in this, oh, everything's going to be so perfect and blissful kind of state of mind. But nobody was telling me how difficult it was going to be. And I do see kind of a theme, I guess, on social media where it's like, it's almost like one or the other of just moms saying like, oh, well, we don't want to scare people and we shouldn't be so negative about motherhood. But at the same time, I feel like without talking about that, it's just very unrealistic of what motherhood actually is.
Yeah, totally.
Toxic positivity.
And I think you had also mentioned before that, like, you were going into like the checkups with your son, and the pediatrician would have a questionnaire, and you would answer that and say, like, as honestly as you could, and maybe you weren't actually doing that well. Your answers actually reflected that, but then like no one actually followed up with you about your answers. I kind of felt the same way with my experience. I mean, do you think that you were secretly hoping somebody would actually say something to you about these answers? And or was it the fact that, like, we're Asian American, maybe they didn't do something about it because they're like, oh, you should have it all together? I don't know. What was your kind of thought about that experience?
Yeah, I think I remember getting the questionnaire and knowing that if I check these boxes, then it's going to be alarming to someone. And so, you're like, well, do I want to alert people? Or like, there's no, it's not like they're really talking to you about it. You're just supposed to fill it out really quickly, right? But I was thinking, no, I'm not okay. So someone needs to know. So I marked all the boxes that should have alerted the staff that I was not doing well. And there was nothing. And you know how often you go in for those appointments and every time you're supposed to fill those out, and like, well, I guess these don't really mean anything. I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. And I felt like I kind of got that same sense. I also wavered, like, how do I answer this? And when I answered truthfully, nothing happened anyway. So then I think after a while, I was like, I'm just not going to even answer it correctly, or I'm not even going to answer it because they're not going to do anything about it. And partly for me, partly it was also because my daughter's pediatrician, I met her like once or twice, and then she went on maternity leave. So I never saw her again for like a few months. And that was like when I was in the worst part of the depression. So she never knew about it. And actually, she didn't even know about it until last year when I took my daughter in for her 4-year visit. I finally told her, like, that I had gone through all this, because, her daughter was also older now. We were just kind of talking about our experiences. And then she's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't even know. And I think actually she was one of the providers that probably would have done something if she were actually there, but she wasn't. So it's Peggy and I, through learning, like with our trainings for PMHC, we've learned that the screening is a huge part of it, but then people don't want to take responsibility for the answers on the screens, so that becomes kind of a problem, down the line. Yeah. And along with, on the other side now that your son's a little bit older, um, you've also been pretty open about sharing your miscarriage journey, and I'm going to just sort of label trigger warning if people don't want to listen to this part. We're going to talk a little bit about Val's story on that. To me, kind of what stands out in particular, though, is that you really normalize this grief that can go on for a while after miscarriage. I really appreciate that. And especially, if the miscarriage happens very early on, because I think so many people will just dismiss it like, oh man, well, at least it was early, or at least you can have a baby. And those are, not great things to say to people. And I think it's so important to hold that space, and respect that healing has no timeline. So, do you mind sharing a little bit with our listeners about what that journey has been like for you?
Yeah. So we had a miscarriage a couple years ago, and we had been trying to have another baby for, I think, probably 2 years. And so I think it was getting to the point where our son was getting older, the age gap would be bigger. So we were thinking, okay, well, if it doesn't happen this time, then I think we should maybe be done trying. Um, but then surprisingly, we were pregnant. And I remember my husband telling me afterwards, okay, let's not get too excited because anything can happen, right? And then I got really upset with him because I had spent a lot of my pregnancy with my son just feeling very anxious and really thinking, knowing that miscarriages were common. So thinking that that would happen to me. And so I think I spent a lot of the first trimester of the pregnancy, just a lot of anxiety and fear. And so I was trying to be intentional and say, no, like this time I'm not going to live in fear. I'm going to just be excited about this and embrace it. And then a week later, I started bleeding and we had a miscarriage. And I think I've never experienced grief to this deep level before. And I didn't know how much it would impact my life moving forward. And I think it's been a really long journey of, I think, coming to terms with it, and giving myself space to heal. And I think I'm not done healing yet. I can still feel like the emotion coming up as we're talking about it. But I know that I have made space for myself to process it, to talk about it, to grieve about it. And I think that's all that I can do moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing with us. I know that, and I, again, really love that you normalize that you don't have to be over it, and there's no timeline on it, right? It's like you said, it's been a few years, and some people might be like, oh, well, you should be fine by now, but why? Why can't why do I have to be fine with it right now, right? You've lost a deep part of yourself, and that's okay to want to sit with that grief for as long as you want, right?
Yeah. And I think that the more, because I have a lot of people in my community that have had miscarriages. And I think the more that I talk to them about it, the more I realize that that you never really get over it. You learn to live your life around it. But the feeling, I think, never really goes, the feeling of loss never really goes away. And yeah, I was just talking to a mom it was my friend's mom, and they were just sharing about how they still think about their miscarriage, and yeah, I think it's just something so personal that everyone is going to grieve it differently. And I think depending on your circumstances and where your mindset was when you found out that you're pregnant, the grieving process will look different. And I think for me, the grieving process has felt really long because we really wanted to have another baby. And I think because I had gotten to the point where I was like, okay, we can be done after the cycle. Like, we can be done. I think because I had said that, I felt even more hurt afterwards. Yeah. We also, after the miscarriage, I did go get some fertility testing done and found out that I have issues with fertility. And so, yeah, trying again after the miscarriage and just kind of being in this cycle of grief of every month not being pregnant. And it kind of brings you right back to the miscarriage again. And I've just been learning how to deal with these waves, I guess, of grief. And my therapist at the time had told me that grief is like a tornado. It just kind of picks you up wherever you are and then it spits you back out. And that kind of really resonated with me because you hear about like the 7 stages of grief, right? And I think when they say stages, it makes it feel like it's neat and compact.
And it's linear.
But of course it's not. It's linear,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And, I would just be going about my day normally and feeling fine. And then all of a sudden something would happen and I would just be like upset. I would be sad and just feeling like that actually would happen a lot when I would be driving to pick up my son from school. And I feel like it was because I had the space and it was quiet for me to be with my own thoughts. But I would just start crying. I'm like, okay, I got to focus on driving. Like, don't get in a car accident.
Yeah.
But just kind of realizing that I need to give myself the space to be able to grieve. Because, I think that the further away that we get from the date that we had the miscarriage, I feel like the time is longer where I don't have these like really intense feelings, but then I don't know, when it's going to hit me.
And I think you've talked a little bit also about like just the secondary infertility part, right? You guys like want to have another child and there's potential that you might just be done, right? And how do you feel about how can you sort of like share some advice for those who may be one and done but not by choice and finding peace in that sort of circumstance, if that's where you're at? I don't know if that's actually where you're at, but like, if that's a mindset to sort of prepare for.
Yeah, I think that from Jasmine, from your post, like you'll share a lot of great content from other people. And I think that's really helpful. And I think I didn't even really know about the concept one and done before, probably because I never thought I would have one kid. But just kind of checking out some of those accounts and seeing what they're posting about. And I think I felt like I didn't fit in, or I didn't quite get, like, I guess I felt like I wasn't their target audience because a lot of these accounts, they're making an intentional choice to be one and done. And I think that I would love to be there rather than wishing that our circumstances were different. I think it was kind of hard for me to digest some of the one and done content because I just was thinking, okay, well, this is where we are, but I don't necessarily want to be here. So but then looking at other moms and seeing how they seemed very empowered, which I'm like so grateful for them that they're making this decision for the health of themselves and for their family. And it's the best fit for their family. So I'm like so happy for that. But then just feeling like, but I'm not quite there yet.
I also wonder too if there is a place where you don't have to be like the one and done moms by choice, because so much of that content is very celebratory and very like, we chose this and you didn't get to, or you don't get to. And it's very different because it's almost as if you're not necessarily one and done, because you have an angel baby that you're grieving the loss of this angel baby. And so you technically don't have just one, right? And what you're going through is really going through life grieving the loss of this angel baby. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay that you don't have to really resonate with a lot of the one and done content out there, because so much of those are like, I chose this and this is why only children are great. And you can still say, this is why my only child is great, but I've lost a baby as well. And you might spend the rest of your days, missing that baby, but still continue to live a life as the date goes longer and farther from the miscarriage date. But I think that's okay. I think that's okay to not have to feel like those one and done moms. And I know that there's people listening to this episode who are exactly in your shoes saying, I do want another child, or I've lost that other one, especially when you had made a choice. You did make a choice to say, we're going to be one and done. And then you were able to get pregnant, which felt like a sense of false hope, which is heartbreaking. And I think that we can hold space to say we are one and done, not by choice, but it's gonna look different because your grief is about this angel baby that is not here today.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if I tugged. I can tell that you're.
No, I just thank you for saying that. I think it means a lot to, I think, have the recognition of the angel baby, of our angel baby. Because I think that for most, like, it's invisible.
Yeah.
And it's just something that, like my husband and I carry, and like our close family and friends know, but then we don't always talk about it or whatever. And so just having that acknowledgement, it just really means a lot to me.
Yeah. And I think thank you, Val, for sharing and being vulnerable, because I think that's the whole point why I really wanted to make sure to highlight a story like yours, is that, like, yes, there are people who are one and done by choice. There are people who are also not by choice. And even the accounts that share about being one and done, some of them may also be grieving the idea that they did want another child too. For me, it's not so easy for me always to be so like 100% gung-ho saying like I like shouting it from the rooftops, like, I'm excitedly one and done, because I also grieve the loss of the vision I always had of having like two children. For me, I think it's coming to embrace that, like, maybe I didn't ever know that I wanted just one. Maybe I didn't realize how great it would be with just one. Maybe I can be content with just one. And for me, it's exploring what that path looks like and filling in those shoes. But there is also like a hidden grief that it's hard, like you said, to see something that's not there.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to see the angel baby that's not there. It's hard to see the vision that we've lost, that dream we had painted. And so I think it helps to talk about it and normalize that it's okay to have that grief. It's okay not to be always excited about that this is the path that I'm on. And it's okay also to like it sometimes, right? To make the best of your circumstances, obviously. But I think I do feel like, with the pieces falling where they are, like things kind of do happen in a way that, like, maybe it's not good to say that like things happen the way they should, but maybe the cards you're dealt, you learn like what to do with it to move forward. And that's the beauty and the, the struggle of life, right? Is how do we move forward from this? But I really appreciate your story and sharing that too. I think, like I said, I've always valued and admired your openness and honesty of like, this is like real life. It's not a pretty package. It's not wrapped up neat in a bow. It's not linear, like you said, right? It's maybe a tornado that spits you out, and this is where I am right now. But I'm going to pick myself back up and I'm going to figure it out, right?
Yeah. And I think something that you said just made me think about a theme that I've been working through with my therapist, is just holding gratefulness and thankfulness for my son while also grieving the baby that we lost. And I think that it was really hard in the beginning to have those two coexist, because it's like, it has to be all or nothing. I can't do both of them. It's just too difficult.
Yeah.
But I think that it really is, holding both of those two together. And I think that I like what you said about just your journey of one and done, and how you'll have moments of grieving, but then also moments where you're really grateful, and like there's a lot of positives to having an only child. I think that that's something that has helped me, is processing, we don't know for sure, but it's looking like we're probably one and done. And just I think that I listened to the last podcast about one and done, and I just really love the conversation there, but just how much negativity there is surrounding only children.
Yeah.
And so I think that I've really had to be intentional about reminding myself what the positives are of having an only child. And I get to give him my undivided attention. We don't have to like split our resources. He could sign up for whatever activities he wants to, because we don't have to worry about juggling a schedule. I think, and one of my best friends is an only child, and I think she's an amazing human being. And I actually asked her, I said, what was your experience like being an only child? Like, what can I do for my son to like help him? And she was just saying, I didn't realize that I was an only child growing up.
Aww.
Because it was just normal for her. Like,
Yeah.
and I think she said it wasn't until she was an adult that she realized that she was an only child. And so it just makes me think that I have this idea of how like your childhood should feel and look, because I had siblings, right? But just because you don't have siblings does not mean that your childhood isn't, fulfilling.
We put these labels on things all the time, and kids don't. Kids aren't sitting there being like, and it's so funny because I never even thought about how an only child would be like, this is my family. I'm my child. I'm the child in my family, and that's interesting that she said that, but it's so true.
I love that.
Kids probably don't really notice, and I think if they have other friends that are only children as well, I think especially we had just talked about this too, like the statistics of people having two children is going down and no children is going up, but the statistic of people having only children has been pretty consistent since like the 80s, and so it's probably more and more common, so your child doesn't necessarily feel like some sort of pariah or something,
Yeah. They don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, they probably love it. And I think why we talk about this is also, again, to normalize that like these kids have unfortunately been given these stereotypes due to poor studies that have come out in the past. And I'm not sure if you read my newsletter about one and one, like WON, like I won a lottery for having, this child to go through my life with. But, the child psychologist that had come out with that study back then basically demonized it for the rest of us. Like, and now it's just been perpetuated, even though it's been debunked by so many theories and studies, like better studies now that show that the personalities are pretty much like you can't even tell the difference between an only child and children with siblings. They say only children actually might have a slight advantage in that, like, I think studies show that some of them they have more intelligent capabilities. But again, they say that's comparable to like the firstborn child, probably because you had more resources when you were just the only child by yourself, right? So I think it's just good to normalize that, like, only children are just children too. And we're all in it to just make sure our kids have the best childhood they can, whatever that looks like. And I'm sure, like you have sisters with kids. I'm sure your son has lots of cousins and other people to hang out with, which is nice too. So I think you'll do the things you need to do to create that community for him. And if another child pops up along the way, like it looks like the door's still maybe open. So yeah, there's still possibilities, right? Yeah. I think, though, maybe one thing, we've talked a lot about how to, how to help people get through the miscarriage, or like things to say. What are things that you would say are things people should not say that are not helpful when you're, talking about miscarriage or secondary infertility? And like, maybe let's go along that line today. Like, what should people not say? What's not helpful?
I think you mentioned a couple of them earlier, but one is it's good that it was early.
Yeah.
Because I think that depending on where your mind and heart were, because we really wanted to have another baby. So really, it doesn't matter that it was early for us because we wanted that baby. And we were celebrating that baby for 1 week. And I think people, especially in Western culture, they really don't like uncomfortable things. And I feel like people feel like they have to say something to make it feel a little bit less hard, a little bit less, just to make it seem softer.
Yeah.
And so I've noticed when I share with people about my miscarriage, there's just a lot of kind of these like quick advice type of things that I wish people would just have not said anything. But yeah, if you know someone that's going through a miscarriage, I think the most important thing is just to listen to them and give them space and not necessarily need to say anything, because I don't think anything that you could say would make them feel better. But just letting them know, that their pain is valid and that you're there for them. I had someone tell me, and I think that, it's true, but I don't need people to tell me, is that everything happens for a reason. It's like, okay, you can tell me that like a year from now, but like not when this is so fresh. And yeah, I think the other one is that people would say when we had a miscarriage was just, they would give me all this advice of how they got pregnant.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe you should try doing this. And I'm like, okay, I don't.
You know what I hate about that one is they pin it on the mother. They're like, oh, you need to do these things because of the miscarriage. When it's like, the miscarriage didn't happen because of anything you did, right? And like, I hate that one because it's like, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? It's like, I don't just, it's not something that you have control over. And that one just blows my mind.
I like that point that, yeah, it's not the mother's fault. And I think by giving suggestions, it almost again highlights that the mother could have done something different. When, like Peggy said, it's not in your hands. Sometimes it's really not. Yeah. Thank you, Val, for sharing all this with us and, giving space, I hope, to somebody else who's listening out there to validate their pain and their grief. And, knowing that it's okay not to make it pretty and neat, right? It's like you said, it's okay to sit with the discomfort. I really like what you said about like people just want to like pat you on the head, send you along, bye, like, oh, you're fine now. Let me give you a Band-Aid. But that's maybe not what we need. Maybe we just need to be recognized and seen, right?
It makes me think of just to plug another guest we had, J.S. Parks. The title of his book on grief is As Long as You Need. And so when it comes to grief, take as long as you need.
Yeah. I'm definitely getting that book because I think there's so many elements like of grief that he's sort of mentioned. It's not just about losing someone, but grief comes in so many different forms. And I'm really learning that a lot more, I think, now as, we're at this stage in our life. So, yeah. So to wrap up for the day, we usually like to end on a note of talking about what we might want to do for our mental health this week, either something you've already done, something you want to do. So we'll kind of just go around and share a little bit. Anybody want to go first or have something off the top of their head?
I didn't think I would share this one, but I realized it is what I've been doing for my mental health lately, is I started crocheting again. Like
Oh, that's
like right in the
fun.
beginning of this episode before we start recording, since listeners don't know, I was like, waiting for us to get started and I was like crocheting. I was like, "Look, Jasmine, look at my the thing I'm crocheting." So, I've been doing that and there's just something super I almost feel like it's like feels like a fidget toy. Maybe it's like an old lady fidget toy or something, but the repetitive motion of like hooking and going through is it's just really relaxing. And so what I've been doing after my kid goes to sleep. My husband wants to play video games. We haven't really found something we want to watch right now together. So like he'll play his video games and I'll just sit on the couch next to him and crochet away like a little old lady. So but it's been really
So nice.
meditative and I don't know what it is about it, but it's just like I'll just sit there and do it. And he's just like, that looks kind of he told me, he goes, that looks kind of cathartic. And I was like, it really is. So I'm crocheting, y'all. That's my self-care. I didn't think I'd say that today, but I'm like, I guess that's what I'm doing.
I think
That's great.
also like for us, sort of like type A's, like neat, organized things. It's
Mhm.
almost like, you have a pattern, right? And you
Yes.
have like a thing that you have a rhythm that you're going
Mhm.
with, and maybe that kind of feels good,
It does.
right?
I love it. If
Yeah.
anyone wants beanies, I'm a beanie making machine right now.
You've churned out quite a lot in like a week, I
I
think.
know.
It's crazy.
It's really fast. I can go really fast.
For me, I didn't think I would say this, but as you were talking about things you're doing that have been sort of helpful to bring pace, um, right now for me, it's doing puzzles. My daughter is really into doing puzzles now, and it's nice because it buys quiet time where we're both just like working on it, and it's something that like we can kind of do together in a way. Like there's some teamwork involved, but there's also some independence involved. And like I love just being able to like find a piece that goes together because it feels like it makes sense. And she said to me the other day, she's like, "Mommy, I actually really like puzzles." And I was like, "Yes, I noticed that, dear." And she's like, "Why do you think that is?" I'm like,
Aw.
"Oh, we're analyzing this." I'm like, "Well, I think it's the feeling you get when you find things that go together, that feeling of satisfaction you found. It was hard work. And now you have this picture at the end where it all makes sense." And she's like, yeah, that's it. That's why. I'm like, we're getting really deep about
I've
this,
never
but
heard of a kid
for
ask, like,
me,
why do I like something?
I know. I
That's
was like,
very introspective.
anyways, it's what we've been doing together as like time to spend together, and just I think it helps me sort of maybe decompress and not think about anything else besides for finding the pieces that fit together. So, yeah.
For me, I have for this week, I am going to work out for my mental health.
Yay.
I think that exercising really helps me uh, have a more positive outlook. Makes me feel. I always feel good. Like I usually don't feel good while I'm doing it. I'm like, why am I doing this? Everything hurts. But then afterwards, I always feel like very accomplished. And then just I've been I've had a hard time since my son was born sticking to a consistent exercise routine. But then I think I don't. It was this fall that I was still struggling with the miscarriage, and I was thinking I just need to do something for myself and make myself a priority. And it would always be something that I would cut out because I would think, oh, I don't have enough time. I need to do this. I need to clean. I need to do that. But then now seeing exercise as a way that I can prioritize myself, it really changes my outlook on it and makes me want to do it. And when I feel better afterwards, I'm like, okay, this is really worth it for me to do.
I remember you actually posting something about how you ran a certain number of miles to honor your angel baby around that time of the miscarriage loss. I can't remember the exact like number of miles you did and stuff, but it was like for every mile. Maybe you can remind me, but I thought that was really beautiful that like you used that to honor your baby.
Yeah, I did. I think I did 9 miles. So
Oh my
like
gosh.
one for every month.
Aw.
Well, before my son, I used to run half marathons,
Oh,
like
wow.
2 or 3 a
You're
year.
a
Like I would run a
runner.
lot.
Okay.
Well, okay. I'm not fast, but I can finish.
Okay,
Okay.
I don't even run. So like
I was going to say I've never ran 9 miles in my life. So that is amazing. Props to you. Wow.
I love,
Good job.
and that's such a nice kind of not tip, what am I saying? Like for other folks that are grieving to maybe think of some way to honor like the 9 months that we would have carried you or however long they were able to carry, like maybe doing something 12, 12, I don't know, like something like that, right? Like maybe they were able to carry for 12 weeks or something. Like I love that idea of like finding something to do to honor the time you had or could have had and stuff.
Yeah, something that's significant to you, and it doesn't have to be a number. It could be something different. Like I know another thing I do is like I'll just buy, the baby would have been born in June, and I think the birth flower for June is roses.
Yes.
So I'll just buy a bunch of roses.
Oh, that's nice.
So there's a lot of things
that's beautiful.
that people can do.
Yeah. Where can people find more of you? Is it just Instagram that people can check out where you hang out or post about things, Val?
Yes, on Instagram at the Wabi Sabi Mama.
Yeah, and Val does these really cool. She has amazing reels. I love the way she puts them together. And she has you had a series on like cooking actually as a 4th generation Japanese American, and like traditional foods and things, and like putting it together and cooking with you. I actually enjoyed watching that series and stuff. And she also makes really good boba drinks. So if you want to check out any of her reels about that. I'm always like, can I come over for boba? It looks so good.
You should come over. That was my pandemic hobby, was learning how to make boba at home.
Spoke to my heart, or both, maybe Jasmine and my heart. So
both of us love boba.
Yeah.
So yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Val.
Yeah, thank you.
We hope you have enjoyed Healing the Tigress and our conversations on maternal mental health in the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Please follow our show and our Instagram page to catch our latest episodes. We have so many fantastic guests and deep topics that we are so excited to cover soon.
If you enjoyed this episode or would like to support us more, please leave us a rating or a review and share this podcast with a friend to spread the word. Check out the show notes for more links. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope these conversations will help our AAPI mothers heal their inner tigress and honor their mental health as they deserve to. See you next time.